Okay, so just a brief introduction to this mimer. This mimer was written in the year Tafresh Pei Dalid, 1924. You'll notice in the heading there's no date given except a year. The reason for this is because this was part of a previous mimer, I believe Parshas Kisisa, that the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, the author of the mimer, said, and for some reason he then took the bulk of the mimer that he said, the previous parsha, and he wrote it as a separate mimer. Why? I don't know, and I don't believe we know. I assume that there was something happening in the community in Leningrad. The previous Rebbe was in St. Petersburg, Leningrad, 1924. That's where he lived. And there must have been an issue surrounding authority and leadership, which this mimer is about, that was very active and boiling at the time. Whether it was within the Chabad Anash community or it was outside, I don't know. And I thought, as I said, I haven't found any historical information about it. All that we know is that in Hayom Yom, as David said earlier, in the Hayom Yom of the 24th of Tishrei, which is the Hayom Yom which instructs Chabad Hasidim to make a Farbrengen on Shabbos Mevorchim. And in that Hayom Yom, he says, and during the Farbrengen, when you guys get together and you talk about improving yourselves, make sure not to poke each other, not to insult each other. Now, why does he say that? So you need a little reka, background for that. It used to be that a Hasidic Farbrengen with Hasidim was such that Hasidim would take it very seriously, and they would talk with each other, and at times they would scold each other, like we're sitting around the table. They meant well, but nevertheless, it was sometimes very, very sharp. I'll give you an example. I heard this from Rabbi Rosenfeld, who's a 90-year-old man today, may be well, and he told me this. In the 1940s, there was a chassid who was still a chassid of the Rebbe Rashab. His name was Rabbi Zalman Moshe HaYitzchaki, from Rashi, HaYitzchaki. And he was a super chassid. What made him a super chassid? He would get up 3 a.m. He would learn Chassidus for 3 hours. He would go to the mikveh. He would daven for 3 hours. And at 9 o'clock, he would go to work. He was a shochet. I heard this from a Mendel Futterfast, who was my great uncle, told me this himself, who was a follower of the Reb Zalman Moshe. So he told me his schedule. So I'm sharing with you firsthand what he told me about this chassid. This chassid, for whatever reason, had a certain habit. And his habit was that when he would farbreng, and he was a Russian chassid, he would say a good l'chaim, he would come down on himself and people around him in a way that was very, very sharp. Not only was it very sharp, sometimes it was actually vulgar. And he was a real chassid. He was speaking to his Yetzer Hara. He was speaking to his animal side, and he had to really bang it and destroy it and clop it. And that was the style that he used. It got to a point, he he comes to Eretz Yisrael. He lived in Tel Aviv, and he was the elder chassid in the area, one of the elder chassidim, and a person of status, like I just told you. And they would ask him to farbring, so he would farbring. But when he would farbring, sometimes people couldn't sit there because he could verbally abuse you. It's very hard to imagine and understand that he could be a legitimate chassid and do that. But this was a certain style. By the way, most chassidim were not this way, but he was. So some of the chassidim sitting at the Farbrengen wrote to the previous Rebbe, to Rebbe Yosef Yitzchak, our author, and they said, Rebbe, we can't take this anymore. This is, we love him and we want him to Farbreng, but what he spews from his mouth is just... The Rebbe wrote him a letter. The previous Rebbe wrote him a letter and told him, people today are not vessels for this type of talk. Please stop. As soon as he got the letter, he stopped. Cold turkey. It was like for someone who was a smoker to stopping to smoke cold turkey, for him to change his entire approach in Farbrenging was cold turkey, going cold turkey, and he stopped. It's this background that is the introduction to this mimer and to this Hayom Yom that you mentioned before on the 24th of Tishrei. What the Rebbe says, since Shabbos Mevorchim is a day when Anash and Chabad Hasidim should farbring, and at farbrengens you mean well, but sometimes you get carried away and you start rebuking the other person, says the Rebbe, don't do that. And then he says, and for an elaborate, more details of this entire field, he says, see the Maimer in Ruach HaMoshel Tov Reish Pei Daled, which we have in front of us. Hi, Sender. So it's not only the way you introduced the Maimer tonight, David, that this Maimer is about constructive criticism. This Maimer is about what a Farbrengen is according to Chabad. There is no other movement in Judaism that has this idea of a Farbrengen as a mainstay and as an equal to learning and davening.